At 10 years old, I was a Boy Scout. So I was actually a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, and they had this thing called Bob a Job Week. And Bob a Job Week meant that after school you had to go around to all the neighbours and you had to do a job for someone. In exchange, they give you a donation to give to the Scouts, and you do this sort of work. You create some value, and that would end up helping the Scout Hall. What was fascinating about it, and what actually fascinated me at the time, is that it wasn't about rattling a bucket. So there was, I'd been involved in fundraising before where you go out and just, rattle the can and people put the thing in. This was actually about a value exchange. I'd turn up and wash someone's car, and I was pulling weeds and doing all of those sorts of things. So they get value in exchange for their donation. The Scout Hall got a lot of value because they had, 50 Cub Scouts running around doing all these jobs in the community and bringing in some money. And what was very fascinating is I ended up getting a lot of value from this experience as well. And I'm not just talking about the learning I got from doing it, I'm also talking about the following week after Bob a Job Week, I realised that the cars that I washed last week were dirty again. The gardens had more weeds. The gutters had been blocked up with more leaves. So I actually, at 10 years old, went round the following week without my Scout uniform and said, last week I washed your car for three bucks. Can I come and wash it again for $3? And it was fascinating. It all started by this idea of creating value exchanges rather than just going around rattling a bucket. So it's interesting because that was, very formational time in people's lives, I suppose, around that 10 years old, and it's something that even to this day, I love the idea of this. Is it possible to create a win-win-win scenario? Is it possible for everyone to exchange some value and come out ahead? So fast forward 20 years, and I meet this guy here, Jeremy Gilley. So Jeremy is a multi-award winning independent documentary filmmaker. He's been to Cannes. He's won all the major awards. He created a film called The Day After Peace. In creating a documentary about peace, he actually went to the United Nations and he spoke to the member states of the United Nations and he petitioned them to create a day of peace. And it was very fascinating because he said, all we want is one ceasefire and non-violence day. But in doing that, he was able to open up to a whole level of conversation that was normally excluded from those rooms, because the idea of talking about world peace for 365 days a year is so radical that most people wouldn't even entertain the conversation. But to get the points across with the underlying principle be, we're just looking for a day of peace, all those arguments could come out, all those ideas could come out. And he ended up getting unanimous resolution from the United Nations that they would actually enact the 21st of September as the International Day of Peace. So he creates this documentary, and then after the documentary had won all of its awards, after the day had been established, he took it on himself to set up a foundation to institutionalise the day. However, he had a major issue when we first started having a conversation. The major issue that he had was that he spent so much time, like we do in business, trying to figure out how do I cover the costs of the boring bit of running my office. So, funnily enough, Jeremy could raise millions in donations for the actual Peace One Day assets and the Peace One Day products. So, for example, they created a schools kit. Ben & Jerry's sponsors the schools kit and pays for that schools kit to go into millions of children's hands. So all of these big exciting things could get funded, but he had a real trouble funding the boring bit. And this was taking up about 40 to 50% of his time. So here he is, half the time changing the world and creating world peace, the other half of the time rattling a bucket trying to figure out how to pay for offices and desks and all those sorts of things. And then we came along to try and face this challenge here. Jeremy spending 40% of his time looking for funding to run the office. We wanted to solve that problem in a way.